It's April 1st. That means it's April Fool's. That means it is draft month. We're going to do a full Chiefs 7-round mock draft. It's not going to be a joke, though. Let's talk.
This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
It's a live edition of the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise Bank, member FDIC. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Very excited to be celebrating draft month here today. We are in the month of the draft. I can't wait. I'm so excited. I'm excited to be here with my friends Maddie Lane and Craig Stout. Matthew, hi, hello. How are we?
We're doing great. It's the month of the draft. We got a lot of stuff happening this month. It's a busy month, busy time of the year, but we're ready. We're here. We're flying. We're cruising through the world at this point in time. And I am just excited to be joined by Kent, who looks lovely, and Craig, handsome and great as ever.
I was a little curious where that was going to go. I also like that Kent set us up just in case we have a terrible mock draft, because it is April 1st. And so if you don't like it, it's a joke. So don't take it out on us.
Perfect. Yeah.
No, you like it. Nobody will dislike this mock draft.
Nobody ever dislikes mock drafts. It's definitely not like 25% of the people that agree with at least one pick and the other 75% call us morons. So definitely does not happen that way all the time.
No, it's the most divisive thing you can possibly do in content. It's great. I can't wait. Before we get into the mock draft, obviously, I think this is the first time that we've had a show on KC Sports Network since the Rashee Rice stuff has gone down. I don't know if we need to get too far down the rabbit hole into some of this, but obviously an awful thing happened on the highway in Dallas. Two cars racing each other. The Lamborghini being rented by Rashee Rice, potentially the Corvette being owned by Rashee Rice. And here we are with a 6-car accident that has led to a few injuries, the fleeing of the scene from the people involved. just awful. I mean, whatever happens here, if Rashee's, people she's associated with, whatever, it just sucks that this happened. Rashee has, it appears he's hired representation. He has hired Royce West of Weston Associates, who is a state senator in the state of Texas. I don't know. Maddie, quick thoughts on this before we move on.
I have zero thoughts on this until we get more information, because I mean, at this point, nothing has really changed as far as we know right now. It is an extremely tragic event. You are glad to hear that everyone is okay. You hope that anybody that was doing the thing they shouldn't have been has to face the ramifications that they should. And beyond that, so that's like the human side of it, right? And then as a fan of the Chiefs, I hope Rashee Rice's involvement is as minimal as it can be, and he misses as little to no time as possible from the team and gets to come back and be a full part of the team. If he can't and doesn't deserve to, then okay, we'll approach that when we get to it. We have no idea where this is going to be at this point in time. So if Chiefs fans have learned anything from past experiences, especially in the offseason when it comes to players, just sit back, let it go its course, and we will see where we are once all the information and details start to come out.
Yeah, can't have an offseason without one of these if you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan right now. Echo a lot of the sentiments. Obviously glad that everybody's okay. I know on its face there, you look at that and it's like, hey, don't be dumb. Don't be stupid. Don't be racing cars at 6:30 p.m. on, the Dallas freeway there. In the same token, he's a young kid. We all made mistakes when we were young and silly and things that we'd like to have back. Hopefully this is his one. And hopefully this is the one that he looks back on if, he has involvement in this that, is kind of shaping up to look like he might. Then hopefully this is just something that he puts behind him, head on straight, and moves forward after this. So like Maddie said, we'll see what the ramifications are. We'll see what happens with all of that. Obviously, not quite as serious as some of the other, car related things that have happened in previous off seasons here. So again, you're glad everybody's okay. You hope that everything comes down the way that, it needs to. The justice system works the way that it needs to. And then we'll deal with whatever comes of Rashee Rice after that.
I think that's well said. Let's mock draft. Let's get out. Let's move on. So what we're going to do today is we are going to do a full Chiefs 7-round mock draft. Trades are a potential option for us to observe, to look at, to make some moves. So that is on the table. We could make some trade ups. We can maybe look at exploring some trade backs if we are so inclined. But let's get right into this thing here. I want to ask you guys the first question before we kind of, get too far into this. How high up are you willing to trade in this mock draft scenario? Do we want to explore, because I think, I've had this theory a while here, right? And we've been talking about it in the DMs a lot. I could see the Chiefs getting crazy with their 2025 draft capital. If you told me that Brett Veach used his 2025 first round pick to trade up in the 2024 draft, to go up and try to secure a blue chip, to go up and try to secure a wide receiver that he absolutely loves. If you told me that he did that, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think because he has received an extra third round pick for L'Jarius Sneed, one that could potentially be in the top 75, 80 picks of the draft, it would not surprise me in the least if he said, you know what, let's go ahead and be aggressive this year, knowing that we've got 3 top 100 picks if we give up a first round pick. Are you guys willing to explore that option? Are you guys willing to talk through that option? What say you? Matthew, I think I know your answer. But let's close it.
Have the entire conversation, right? I watched this team, and they have been nothing but the opposite of aggressive when it comes to making moves as of late. The entire point, and you've talked about it in the past too, it's kind of been your thing. Their whole point has been hitting singles and doubles to put guys on base because they have Patrick Mahomes, because they have Barry Bonds coming up to the plate during the height of his powers, right? Like that's exactly what they have going. You just need to get guys on base because something good is going to happen. That's been their entire stance. Do I think that they are about ready to all of a sudden at this point, when they are coming off of, again, a relatively conservative offseason where their only outside signing is a 1-year rental on an incredible deal for Hollywood Brown, do I think they're about ready to unload a mass amount of draft capital to go jump up into the top 16-ish picks? I think it's pretty unlikely. So like if I don't think using next year's first round pick is entirely out of the question. It all depends how you're going to value it. People are going to value that as low as humanly possible for the Chiefs. So like, I still think you're looking at getting up into the early, like 20 as probably the farthest you're going up without spending multiple day 1 to day 2 picks from over the next 2 drafts. And I just don't know if the Chiefs are going to go more than that.
Yeah, guys, the Chiefs are going to be good, and the NFL knows that, and that makes it very difficult when you're talking about trade compensation here. First of all, the NFL doesn't want to trade with the Chiefs, period. Like, they look at all this, and they're like, why would we help you when we don't help you? You go and win the Super Bowl. So if we're helping you, we're reducing your margin of error. We don't want to do that. Conversely, you can just pretty much assume that the Chiefs are picking at pick 32 for this foreseeable future here, and GMs will. Like, I know that they're going to believe that they're going to win the Super Bowl. Like, don't get me wrong. It's not San Francisco is not going to sit here and go ahead, Kent. Yeah.
Well, I was just saying, and even if you want to if they want to play on the conservative side, the Chiefs have made the AFC Championship game every year. So Patrick Mahomes' career.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. 29 is the ceiling for this pick.
Correct. So even trying to project that into the future, knowing that you are giving up an asset that you don't get to use until later, until next year. And guess what? It's probably going to be at the back end of the first round. And all of the conversations that we have about this team and that we have about pick 32 and, crap, all the good players are gone now. The rest of the NFL knows that too. So looking at trading for a potential first rounder next year just doesn't move the needle in the same way that maybe did in the past. So while I understand that, while I understand this team looking to be aggressive, maybe they're in love with a wide receiver and offensive tackle that could really solve all the problems. I'm with everybody there. Like, I totally agree. I would love to go up and fix one of those two positions in a good trade up. The fact of the matter is, it's taking so many assets for the Chiefs to move up. They couldn't move up last year. They couldn't offer enough for what Brett Veach was comfortable with. And Brett Veach loves to trade up. Like, he loves to trade up and couldn't put enough on the table to get in front of teams. What happens now when you're trying to talk about moving up to pick 15-ish? No, you're going to have to throw in a king's ransom to get up there at this point.
So, but I think this is there's a couple things playing into this. It's all right. So Brett Veach has traded up aggressively. He traded up like 3 or 4 times last draft. He tried to trade up in the first round, and then he went and traded up in the second round and traded up in the third round. He traded up for Trent McDuffie, and when Trent McDuffie fell, a player that they viewed as a blue chip player that they loved, that they weren't planning on drafting necessarily, they went and made it happen. And so I just know that this team is going to have, they've got to go get their blue chips, and going and getting a blue chip has worked for them with the Trent McDuffie move. So I just wonder if it's not on the table for them to be ultra aggressive, move into the teens,
with that
mid-teens.
Specifically with that move, though, to McDuffie, I think McDuffie range is a little bit different than what I was saying earlier of trying to go up to like 16. Yes, they gave up picks, but it was a late day 2 pick and then a round 4 pick, and that's what they used to move up. So, like, yeah, if that's what it takes to go get a falling blue chip, sure, I think that's on the table. I was more thinking going up higher than that, though. I was thinking of trying to work up into the mid-teens, is what we were discussing.
Correct.
I think move up into the early 20s is definitely on the table for this team if a guy's falling. Now, it's also worth noting, it's kind of hard to trade up for a falling blue chip because teams don't want to trade away from them. It worked with Trent McDuffie for sure, but there's probably a reason. Maybe the fact that he's super undersized and like one of the only cornerbacks ever to go in the first round with his like size profile, right? So to get a guy that's falling that you're going to consider a blue chip, it usually is going to make them be a little bit of an outlier in some way. Not that that's wrong. Like, not that you're wrong about calling a guy a blue chip. Then it's just, it's hard to trade up for a guy that the entire, league sees as really, really good, unless they have some kind of outlier part of their profile like McDuffie did. But I do think that kind of trade is on the table if it's only taking those level of picks.
And for people who don't remember what the Chiefs gave up, they had the 29th pick for Trent McDuffie in that draft. They gave up pick 94, pick 121, and the 29th pick. So that's a first, third, and fourth round to move up to pick 21. At this point, yeah, I could see them doing something like that. That makes some sense. Completely get that. But again, we are talking early 20s now, and that was pick 29. So you're going to devalue that a little bit more by picking at pick 32. So I'm saying I'm with Maddie. I think it's early 20s is probably the earliest that the Chiefs will realistically move up. Not that they can't move up higher, but I think realistically looking at the future, they got a lot of top players. They got a lot of money on the books tied up in very few players right now. The best way to supplement that and the best way to keep your Super Bowl streak going is to draft smart, not give up all those assets and lose that cost control talent.
I think the Chiefs could get weird this year. I
know
this
Kent
isn't
really,
sourced.
he really wants them to get weird and move up and fix the position, and I'd be on board. I would, but man,
it's not that like I'm clamoring for it, but I just I could see a scenario where if things just kind of start getting weird, and there's a player that they love on the board, I'm not gonna be surprised at all if they just go out and just go crazy and try to get him, knowing that they have an extra top 100 pick in 2025. That's just kind of how I feel. So we'll see. This is why the draft is fun. I'm going to go ahead and run our mock draft simulator to about pick 21, 22. We'll see kind of in that range if we want to start looking at trading up. But we are going to be running on the NFL mock draft database mock draft simulator. For the audio people, we will make sure to keep tabs on that. We won't leave you hanging here. Running the simulator here. and we'll run it till about pick 22-ish, and then we'll just kind of look at the scenarios and the players that might be available to the Chiefs in that range in this scenario, and then just kind of go from here. So we're going to pause at pick 22. In this scenario, you've got Talise Fuaga, the offensive tackle out of Oregon State, Laiatu Latu, the edge out of UCLA, Byron Murphy, the defensive tackle out of Texas. I know what I'm doing. Now, pause. We can play with a little flexibility here. I typically take the top 3 players off the board when I'm doing a mock draft simulator, because I want to try to give a little bit of buffer in case Caleb Williams falls to pick 32 and you just, I typically take a couple players off the top of the board just to kind of reduce our options. But we're sitting here at pick 22, the Philadelphia Eagles. Do we think that Philadelphia Eagles would trade with the Kansas City Chiefs? Maddie.
Yes.
Okay.
How he trades with anybody for whatever he sees fit at any point in time. And I think they have they need some extra picks in this draft, if I remember right. Like, they are not loaded. However, if we're going to say that we take these kind of top 3 names off here just to balance it out, because I think there's a very, very slim chance that Fuaga ends up available at this point in time. And Byron Murphy is possible, but not super likely. So if we're taking those guys off, it looks like our only trade option is Brian Thomas Jr. How do we feel about going up to pick 21-ish to draft him? Yeah, you can scroll down and see what other players are available, but if we are removing those top 3 guys, it looks like we're making a move up for one guy is how I'm kind of reading this situation.
I think this is a scenario where you see the wide receiver, Brian Thomas Jr., as kind of a tier above the next tier. And so if you believe strongly in that, you want a guy that can kind of win down the field. Maddie, I think you've comped him to a young, souped up version of MVS, if I remember correctly. That's somebody you've kind of comped him to. I know people are going to see that as a curse word, but honestly, it's not a bad player. Do you want to try to go move up for a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. here? Should we let this thing play out?
I'm going to leave this decision up to you guys. I think if this was the scenario that was presented to me, I would consider offering pick 64 to move up and see if we could swing Brian Thomas Jr. at this pick, but it's only if you guys are accepting of it.
Man,
an overpay.
He fits. That is a little bit of an overpay. But again, like I said, to kick this thing off, Chiefs are going to have to overpay a little bit here. If they were trying to kind of go like for like, they're probably not getting it. Obviously, we're removing Byron Murphy from this because I just don't think he'll be there. But that's a slam dunk. I would overpay for Byron Murphy on this team. Brian Thomas Jr., I feel like with the wide receivers still on the board here at pick 22, A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, you've got Brian Thomas Jr., you got a couple other guys here. I think I'd let this ride a little bit. I love BTJ. I think he makes sense in this offense, but I think I'm going to let it ride.
All right, I say let's ride. I'm with you. Let's let it ride and just kind of see what happens and what falls to the Chiefs.
Pause again at 26 if he's still there.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay.
That's just my only thing. If he's still what we're going to say is available at 26.
Okay, so we've gotten to pick 26 now, and at pick 27, the Arizona Cardinals, who are a team that might want to accumulate some assets still and continue to build the depth of that roster, they might be interested in taking a little bit of draft capital here. Because you're right, Maddie. This is now sitting in you could give up pick 95 and 159 for a Brian Thomas Jr. here.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you need the second pick to make it work. You would have to see what the trade. Now, here's the thing. We can figure this out quick. We already talked about the Brian Thomas Jr. thing. At this point, I'm completely on board. This is no longer a point where I'm hey, maybe it's okay. But if I'm only trading a 1 and a 3 to get up and get Brian Thomas Jr. in this draft class, I am taking it. It's up to you guys.
Yes, taking it. Slam
Let's
dunk.
do it. The Chiefs have traded up with the Arizona Cardinals to pick 27, giving up pick 95.
The Cardinals now have 4 third-round picks in this draft class.
They are loading up on draft capital to continue to spread talent across the roster, and the Chiefs are taking Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver out of LSU. Matthew, what are the Chiefs getting in Brian Thomas Jr.?
An actual X wide receiver, a receiver that you can line up on the line of scrimmage. And so like, okay, when you say X wide receiver, there's a couple different things that go through people's mind. Like this isn't just a contested catch guy. I want to be very clear about that. This is a fast wide receiver that runs a 4-3-3, legitimate, and you see it on tape. He runs by guys nonstop, and you get these defensive backs. And yes, it's in college, and it's at the SEC level, though. It's good competition. Guys just have to play off of him, because if you get up on him, and you press and you miss at all, or you take one misstep, he's gone. And you have to have a safety over the top. And that safety has to be ready to turn and run. So like he has legitimate speed where he just runs by guys, but he's still young. He's still learning. So like I do think he's going to develop into a more a more full on route tree that you see from an outside boundary wide receiver. But what I like about him is not only does he provide a vertical threat, he beats press coverage. His ability to beat press coverage, his success rate, according to like Matt Harmon's reception perception, was right there near 80% or over 80% against press coverage. That's crazy. The Chiefs have nobody that can do that currently on their team against press coverage. That's something they're missing. And I like that he isn't stuck with just winning in contested catch situations. Here's a guy that wins on the outside, on the boundary, but does so more so with his speed, his athleticism, while you develop his route tree, rather than just asking Pat to throw him 50-50 balls down the sideline. I think that's something that fits with the Chiefs relatively well.
And his success rates on the routes that the Chiefs want their X wide receivers is high. I've got a post coming out on the KCSN Substack tomorrow that is looking at those X wide receivers with Patrick Mahomes, the guys that they have traditionally trotted out there that aren't necessarily, your traditional X wide receivers, these giant dudes that are contested catch guys. The routes that they win on are the routes that Brian Thomas Jr. wins on. And so, you're going to have a guy that, runs a good curl, runs a good out route, runs a good 9 route, runs a good corner route. Those are all staples of the Chiefs offense, the areas where you want him to have a little more success. Comebacks, digs, and posts. Guess what? Andy Reid doesn't have his X wide receivers do all that often. Run those sorts of routes. So there's one of these guys that is a little more tailor-made for what Andy wants to do, has the vertical speed to keep guys honest, to really force that too high coverage. Even with Hollywood Brown out there, you've got two guys now that can really press vertically there and still has the big body to do it. I think this makes sense. You didn't have to give up too terribly much in a trade up. I love this all around for the Chiefs.
And I agree with everything you've also said. And I know people are kind of picking him apart a little bit here and there, right? But at the same time, 68 catches, 1,177 yards, and 17 touchdowns in the SEC. He averaged 17 yards per catch. At some point, we've got to just appreciate the body of work too. There are definitely reasons to nitpick him, but at the same time, I do think he's going to find production, especially if he's with Patrick Mahomes. By the way, if you haven't heard, we are releasing the KCSN draft guide a day early. So we are going to be releasing on Thursday this week. The KCSN draft guide will be out on Thursday. You can pre-order it right now. Get 3 months to KCSN Substack so you can read Craig's great article, and you will get the book when it releases on Thursday. So you get 3 months of KCSN Substack and 306 pages, I believe is what it is, of Chiefs-specific draft content. So the link is in the description if you are listening on audio, or if you are watching right now, please consider pre-ordering. We would really appreciate it. The Chiefs are looking at some round 2 scenarios right after this.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
The Chiefs traded pick 32 and 95 to the Arizona Cardinals for the right to select Brian Thomas Jr. We are sitting here in round 2. I have the mock draft simulator we are using paused at pick 52. This is roughly the range that the Chiefs could potentially go and make another move up if we so choose. Do we want to even really explore that, considering this team has just already made a move up, or do we want to just let this ride to pick 64, guys?
I think you got to let this ride. Just quick glancing at the top guys here. I don't see anything that would make me, jump up and
Right.
figure it out by breaking into next year's draft capital.
Yep.
You can go and start it.
Well,
I just wanted to say this is also the one thing I wanted to, with why trading up for Brian Thomas Jr. Mattered here to me. Here you're at pick 50. I don't 52 or whatever it is. I don't know if Ladd McConkey's really going to make it this far, but that's the guy that I think a lot of people are going to want to take at 32 anyway. And I definitely feel a little bit more comfortable with the long-term outlook of a Brian Thomas Jr. than a Ladd McConkey. And now I think you start to see that wide receiver outlook really starts to thin out as you go through the draft through this range.
Yeah, and the players we're looking at right now, if you are just listening to the audio-only version, Ladd McConkey, who we've just selected a wide receiver, Kamari Lassiter, the cornerback out of Georgia, Zach Frazier, the center out of West Virginia, a Tyler Nubin, the safety out of Minnesota, Edrin Cooper, linebacker at Texas A&M. I feel very comfortable just kind of moving out of this pocket and letting this thing ride. Let's just kind of go out to pick 64 while we're doing that. Hey, leave us a 5-star review on our audio channels and tell us who you want the Chiefs to pick in the first round. Tell us who your first round pick is. Tell us who your preference is, and we'll try to get at you there.
You can tell us what you think about the mock. You can leave your own mock draft in there. Do whatever you want. Just let give a little 5-star review. Tell us what you were thinking about our mock draft in there or in the chat here with us. That way we get to read it.
Absolutely. And there's one trade. We have received one trade offer. Kind of looking at the board, I don't think I really want to do that. Let's just kind of move on. The options available for the Chiefs sitting here at pick 64. You've got Chris Braswell, edge out of Alabama, Junior Colson, linebacker out of Michigan, Jatavian Sanders, the tight end out of Texas, Michael Hall, the defensive tackle out of Ohio State, Christian Haynes, the interior offensive lineman out of UConn, Trey Benson and Jonathan Brooks, the running backs, and Marshawn Kneeland. This is a fun group. This is a fun pocket. You could actually make if you want to make the argument, they can make a small trade back. Yeah. I could hear it.
That's what I was going to say. I actually might have taken that offer. You're moving back. What was it? 3 spots or something like that. I feel good about a Michael Hull Jr., a Jatavian Sanders, and a Marshawn Kneeland all being available, or at least one of them being available. I don't think that there's a risk there. So, yeah, I would have been okay with that to recoup some capital. I get why we didn't, but I would have been okay with.
I'll tell you, I think the draft math that we were offered was just a little bit unfair too. I think it was a little bit too in favor of the Chiefs. I don't like to do those kind of scenarios.
If you use this database when teams offer you a trade, it's very favorable for you but that's how it's going to be in the real draft too. They're going to see somebody they want a specific player is the theory I think they go for. But yes, the Chiefs were getting way better value. So yeah, let's stick here. We just traded once. We don't need to argue and finagle about a trade again if we went take the one that was offered, which was from the Patriots, to move back a couple spots. But listening to that rundown, can you quickly look at any of the offensive tackles available?
Yeah, sure.
I'm just looking here real quick and this would be a prime trade back spot. If somebody wanted to move up, you got some Blake Fisher out of Notre Dame, Roger Rosengarten out of Washington. There's guys there, but nobody again at tackle is screaming, you have to take them here versus trade back to get them. So I think we can just kind of look around, take whoever we think the best player available is. I think Kent is a big on a Marshawn Kneeland. And at this moment in time, the Chiefs don't have a starting defensive end while Charles Minihue is healthy to go across from George Karlaftis. Not that Felix Anudike-Uzomah can't develop, but he's probably not going to go from 15% of the snap counts to 70% in one offseason. So maybe getting a guy to play on early downs in the building would be useful here.
Now, all the rumors and everything point to Mike Dana signing very, very soon. And who knows if maybe that would have been announced already had the Rashee Rice stuff not have happened this weekend. They may not have wanted to layer that stuff on top of each other. So do we want to assume that Dana is back, or do we want to? So. Okay. So I know the popular pick here and what people were saying in the chat, and I totally get it. Patrick Paul, offensive tackle out of Houston, is gone in this scenario. Would have been a good one. I think that fits there. I'm with Maddie. I don't like the offensive tackles. I would say either Michael Hull Jr. or Marshawn Kneeland. I like both of those guys. I like what they both bring to the table. I think both of them would fit well within the Chiefs defense.
All right, so let me make a case for Michael Hull Jr., and I know it may not be the most popular thing. He is a little bit undersized is a little bit on the undersized side for what the Chiefs have typically preferred. He's a more traditional 3-tech. Boy, that sounds, hey, look, another traditional 3-tech. But here's the case for Michael Hall. He is 20 years old. He is a young player. He will be 24 years old when he inks his second contract in the NFL. The Chiefs could use him as another guy that can really make a difference in the passing game as a pass rusher and help lengthen Chris Jones, home stretch of his career here by taking a little bit of the burden off of Chris Jones from the interior pressure perspective. And by the time Chris Jones' contract has expired, you've got a 24-year-old defensive tackle that, if things are going the way you're anticipating, is ready to take on a bigger role here in Kansas City. You are just replacing, Chris Jones with another, really talented interior penetrator. I like the idea of a Michael Hall Jr. I like the idea of a Jatavian Sanders. I can make an argument for Christian Haynes. I think he's a fantastic, future interior offensive lineman for this team when they're going to have a lot of turnover on the offensive line. Like this is a fun pocket to play in. And so I will leave it up to you two to pick Matthew, and let's let Maddie have it. Craig, Maddie kind of gave us the BTJ a little bit, right? So Maddie, you can have it.
Oh goodness. I'm with Craig's initial spot here. I would have traded back out of this pick if I was in control. Like I don't love having to make this choice here. I see upside and downside with all the guys. I think right now, if we're assuming that Mike Dane is coming back, bringing in a Marshawn Nealon is another guy that I think might need a year or two to develop. So I might lean away from him, as I don't know how ready he is going to be on day one, jumping from Western Michigan to the NFL. Let's go Michael Hall Jr. We know the Chiefs have had some interest in him. He's come in for a top 30 visit. He can prolong the career of Chris Jones. If they like what they saw out of him, go ahead and bring him in, get another interior disruptor. We could have peaked at cornerbacks too before he moved on. I didn't really think about that till later, but they weren't in the top of the board. So I think they kind of whooshed over my head a little bit.
Whooshed over his head. So the Kansas City Chiefs have picked in the first round Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver out of LSU, at pick 27. And they have gone with interior defensive tackle Michael Hall Jr. Out of Ohio State with pick 64. They have surrendered pick 95 in order to move up for Brian Thomas Jr. But if I'm sitting here after 2 days, I am geeked out at the idea of a Brian Thomas Jr. and a Michael Hall Jr. These are both young players too. Both of these guys are younger players. They kind of fit that I think really the Chiefs want to try to grab these 20, 21, 22-year-old kids in the first round when ultimately, if you look at some of their trends too, Felix, Clyde, they've taken some of these young players before. I think they like that. And both of those guys kind of fit that mold too. Some upside there. Man, this would be such a fun draft. If the Chiefs started out like this, I'll just tell you guys, I'd be absolutely thrilled with how this was going. I have paused it at pick 112, and that is roughly the range that picks 131 and 159 could get you up to. There are still some interesting players out there on the board. Maddie, do you want to look at cornerback a little bit here? Just have the conversation.
Yeah, you can see what's available. I'm looking at the available players right now for those that are listening back. Brandon Dorlus is available. I don't think he's making it this late into the NFL draft. His versatility, people are going to eat that up. Cole Bishop, I think, is going to climb up boards for being a bigger safety in a weak safety class that tested well. So the top two names for those watching on the board right now, I think we're just going to operate under the concept that they are probably not available, because I doubt either one of them make it there. And as much as I like Cade Stover as a guy that's there, I'm not trading up for him. Dominic Pooney's available. I'm not trading up for an interior offensive lineman or a tight end in this class. So there's a couple good talents there, just nobody I think that's worth trading up this far to snag. I don't know if anybody disagrees with that.
I want to see who is available at wide receiver right now. I know that we traded up for a wide receiver already. I'm curious, since 95 is gone right now.
Let me read them out. Let me hear him out. Brendan Rice out of USC, Johnny Wilson, Florida State, Malik Washington out of Virginia, Jamari Thrash out of Louisville, Luke McCaffrey out of Rice, Jacob Cowing, Arizona. Taj Washington, USC. I think that's kind of where I think things kind of stop. I'm okay. Yeah,
I was curious to see if Javon Baker was still there, Burton was still there. Just trying to see who fell out of day 2. This is usually when teams re-rack their board. They sit down, they kind of target guys again, starting with day 3. I love Malik Washington. I do. I don't know, based on trading up for Brian Thomas Jr., if trading up for Malik Washington here makes sense. But, man, the offense would be super fun with Malik Washington in tow.
Looking at that list, I think the Chiefs pick's a little ways away still, but I think you would still, not that, you can't really do it this way, but I think you have a couple guys here that I think are close enough that could fulfill a similar type of role with Malik Washington, Jamari Thrash, even though he didn't play a ton on the slot in college. I think that's where he's going to project in the NFL. Even a Cowing or a Taj, you have enough guys that you can project as a slot possession wide receiver that maybe gives you a little extra yak in case things don't go well with Rashee Rice going forward. I think you probably don't have to make a trade up for a guy like that. And when you quickly went over to corner, I didn't see anybody that looked like an elite value that was hanging out there. And that is this cornerback. We got Cam Hart, DJ James, Josh Newton. There is.
Let me sit and wait on Jerry and Jones if I'm going to take a guy. That sort of deal. Yeah.
Yeah. This range for cornerbacks in this class, I don't think is as strong as the phrase "it's a strong cornerback class" leads on. I think it kind of caps out after your top 6-7 guys, and then it's just a lot of pick and choose guys that fit your scheme. And I don't know if any of them are worth making a move up for.
Let's move on. We're gonna let it ride. Let's go let it ride. We kind of looked at what picks 131 and 159 could get you, and we have kind of elected to just kind of let it ride out a little bit. So we'll wait until the Chiefs are sitting at pick 131. Let's have the conversation about some realistic available players.
There's a top 30 player for the Chiefs.
In this scenario, Zach Zinter out of Michigan's available. Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State is available. I don't think Ben Sinnott's available at 131.
I don't think so either.
I would absolutely sprint to the podium if he was there at 101. All right, let's have the question about Malik Washington, though. Do we think Malik Washington is sitting there at 131 in the real draft? Or do we think there's a chance that he's sitting there at 131 in the real draft?
I think there's a chance both of those guys are sitting there at this pick in the real draft. Honestly, Malik Washington or him. So yeah, I think there's a chance that those guys are sitting there. I think you also, I'm quickly kind of glancing through this. It looks like you were going to have your, an option of what do we think we're looking at here, right? Getting another receiving option, or are we trying to add something? I think you got to kind of start looking at what we're looking for. Our Jamari Thrash, who I called out earlier, is still there. If you want to go interior offensive lineman, Mason McCormick out of South Dakota State is available. Zach Zinter, you mentioned, is available. So there's guys in the trenches or as a receiving weapon.
I honestly, if I had my choice of Mason McCormick, Malik Washington, and who's the other guy that you brought up, Maddie?
Ben Sinnott's still available. I think he should be.
I would take not Malik. I would take Mason McCormick in this scenario. Again, you got to be thinking for the future. Joe Tooney and Trey Smith may be gone next year. This is a 2025 pick. I would go slam dunk Mason McCormick being there. He's an excellent football player that you can have be a depth offensive lineman for a year, and he's ready for a starting role next year. I'm not sure he is available at this point in the draft.
I'll tell you this: if the Chiefs traded pick 131 and 159 for Mason McCormick, I would be okay with that. 100%. If they took,
can I offer one? Oh, sorry, I'm fine with the pick. This is just the counter side of it, right? You take Mason McCormick here as an interior offensive lineman. What are the odds that you're getting a Malik Washington level player?
You're not.
30 picks later. Now, do I think McCormick is the best interior offensive lineman available right now? Yes. How big of a drop off though are you looking a full round later at interior offensive line? That's the only thing I'm looking at here. If that's what you're deciding between, or even saying, if you want to say Malik Washington's not there, even looking at a Jamari Thrash or somebody, I just think that you can find competent interior offensive linemen a little bit later than you can receiving options. But I'm fine with McCormick.
I think you're right, though. I think you are right, Maddie. I think there is a chance that there is more competent interior offensive line. Like if Hunter Norzad is available at 159.
I love Hunter Norzad. I would be absolutely fine with that later in this draft. I think that he makes a lot of sense too. Where are corners? That would be the only other position that I think that the Chiefs could be looking at here.
Jerry and Jones is there.
Again, I really do love Jerry and Jones. I think he would fit for Spags. There's a lot of positives there. He's not a tier 1 C-back guy, and I know how I try and target tier 1 C-back guys at this point, but Jerry Jones with his flexibility and what he could do, I like that. I don't know.
Craig, I'm gonna let you make the pick.
Let's go Malik Washington. I can't turn my back on my guy. We're going Malik Washington here.
I tell you what, when I look at guys, I would take him in the top 100. I love Malik Washington. And you know what? There probably is scenarios where a guy like a Malik Washington could be available down here. But this is a guy that led college football in receptions last year. He won in several different areas of the field. He's a guy that can run after the catch a little bit. He's competitive at the catch point, despite being a little bit on the smaller side, despite being small, short. But I just think I think if you're looking at pairing Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Washington, those are two guys that complement each other extremely well. I think Malik Washington would be an outstanding pick. Let's go with Malik Washington, the wide receiver out of Virginia, with pick 131. All right, so now we are going and moving on to pick 159 here. I think the interior offensive lineman might be a good place to kind of start and have that conversation. I'm not going to worry about trades in day 3 here. Mason McCormick's still on the board. I'm not going to allow us to do that.
No,
I don't think that is a realistic scenario. I'll just tell you, if the Chiefs pick Mason McCormick at pick 95, there's not going to be an ounce of surprise to me. I'm going to be totally fine with that pick because he's a really good player that can fill multiple spots and will be a starter in 2025 through 2027. Like, this is a really good football player. Anyways, let's talk about what we might want to see out of the Chiefs in round 5 with pick 159, Matthew.
Well, here, let's start away from offensive line because I think we were kind of looking at probably going into that route. So start with everybody here. We're just seeing if anybody lasted real long that seemed like they fell a whole lot. Your best tight end, Jaheim Bell, it looks like that's available. Jerry and Jones still available. Okay, no, never mind. We were not at the top of the list here. Okay. Yeah. We're removing the top guys off the list. So like we're going to take off the Wingo, McCormick, Jamari Thrash. They're not available. Javon Foster, offensive tackle out of Missouri for depth. This seems to be about the right range, I think, for him, right? If you want to go that route. If you were looking for a nickel type defensive back, Tyke Smith out of Georgia is available. He's listed as a safety. He's going to be a slot defender. I do think was Jerry and Jones, Craig's guy, still available here?
He was still available.
That would be a hard. This is a kind of where I think I start to see him because I do wonder if he's going to be pigeonholed into being a slot only corner at the next level.
I think,
and so that is one question that I do have with him. But like he's a guy, if you want to say the Chiefs are going to get their best defensive backs out there, I think this is the kind of right range for him. So now we can decide between those guys versus offensive line from here. But I just wanted to look at some of the names that were at the top that were available.
I like offensive line here. I think this is a nice sweet spot for offensive line, whether that be the Missouri tackle, whether that be, maybe a Nourzad or Delmar Glaze or somebody like that. I think that makes sense based on how they've built things. This is a nice spot with the type of value that's there at offensive tackle and interior offensive line. I think you're actually probably getting a little bit above value at those positions. So that's my vote. I think it's offensive line for me personally. I'm willing to listen, but I think it's offensive line for me.
And I think like the conversation here, Hunter Nourzad is more of a center than a Delmar Glaze. So what do you want to do? Like, do you want to
Nourzad, who also played all the way out to tackle? Totally an Andy Reid guy.
Tackle real quick as well, just to make sure there's not another guy that should transition inside. That was one thing I wanted to look at here. No, not particularly. And we're looking at Javon Foster, Garrett Greenfield, teammate for Mason McCormick at South Dakota State. Those guys look more like developmental tackles to me than straight up interior offensive linemen. So yeah. This to me kind of looks like, what do you want to go for, right? I think Nourzad gives you a guy that's a little bit more position flexible, probably a little bit more ready to step in on day one if you need be. But I think a guy like Delmar Glaze out of Maryland has a little bit more upside. I think he's a little bit better of an athlete. He's a little bit more fluid. He might even be a tackle at the NFL level. He's got the arm.
He's got tackle reps.
Yeah, that's where he played at Maryland. So like he's a guy that might have a little bit more flexibility. And since the Chiefs don't need someone to step in on day one, he seems like a guy that might be worth the spot here, or at least worth some interest here.
I'm making the pick this time. I'm going with Delmar Glaze out of Maryland. We're doing it. So there you go. So just as a recap here, the Chiefs traded up pick 32 and 95 for Brian Thomas Jr. Then they took Michael Hall Jr., the defensive tackle out of Ohio State. Then at pick 131, they went and grabbed wide receiver again and took Malik Washington out of Virginia. And then at pick 159, we have the Chiefs taking offensive lineman Delmar Glaze. All right, we are at pick 173. The Chiefs have 2 picks left in this draft. What would you like to see the Chiefs explore here, Matthew? Like, what positions do we think they should look at here?
Check what's available at tight end and cornerback.
Okay, so tight end, we are looking at Jaheim Bell out of Florida State, more of a F-type tight end. Eric All, the tight end out of Iowa, who the Chiefs are having in for a 30 visit. Yep. AJ Barner out of Michigan. Tip Ryman out of Illinois. I don't think he's going to be available either at this point in the draft. I would be stunned. I would sprint to the podium if Tip Ryman was there. This is another guy. If the Chiefs took Tip Ryman at pick 95, I'm not going to be upset. So if that kind of just tells
for me.
Nah, that's right about where it is for me. I really like him. I think he'd be a wonderful complement into the tight end room. Tanner McLaughlin out of Arizona. So there's some interesting tight ends there. Matthew, I think that's a fun group to have the conversation about. Do you want to look at tight end? Or do you want to look somewhere else?
I wanted to look. I just wanted to see what was available. Those look like guys that probably should be available. Then I see a lot of guys that look like tight end 2s or projects. So look what's available at corner. I think corner is probably going to have more of a spot here.
Okay, so Josh Newton out of TCU, Jarian Jones still there out of Florida State, Nehemiah Pritchett out of Auburn, Shaw Smith Wade out of Washington State, Jalen Simpson out of Auburn, Dwight McGlothern, Arkansas. I mean, I don't know what you think. Kamarian Richardson?
Is there anybody there that stands out to you at all, Craig?
No, not really. I don't like this from a draft value perspective. I think most of the guys that I would take the swing on from an athletic profile standpoint, which is what I'm always looking for corners, probably going to be around at 221. I'm going to have my pick of the litter. That's kind of where this cornerback class stands. There's a lot of depth to it, but if you're looking for depth and athletic profile, there's going to be guys still available back in round 7. So I don't love any of the corners. Again, I don't know that Jarian Jones is going to be available here, but I'm looking at him as not available. Other than him, I don't love a lot of the corners that are left.
What about edge? I'm going to try to see if we can add another body to the edge room here, because we know we discussed it at 64 with Marshawn Nealon, but we could look at some Spagsy types that are sitting out here on day 3.
Yeah, Spagsy type. So there's not a lot of them in this draft class.
Yeah.
No, I mean, so the way I'm looking at this Chiefs defensive end room is George Karlaftis is clearly a guy you're going to keep around for a long time. I don't know the future of Charles Omenihu past this year, and a guy that you're picking at this point in time has to be done entirely with the idea of the future in mind, right? So a lot of these guys are projecty, but you're kind of getting projecty guys that you're basing it on their athleticism to be pass rushers, and they already have 2 guys on the roster that fill that mold. So Eric Watts out of UConn was about the only guy that when you were scrolling through that made sense. But even still, I don't know if he's ready to step in on day 1 and help you a lot, and you're getting another project defensive end. I think you kind of settle this in. You can check running backs. I know some people have asked for running back too. This would be a time where you'd start to feel a little bit comfortable with it.
I can make an argument. I don't think Dylan Johnson's going to be available to running back out of Washington as we see here. I would make an argument for an Isaiah Davis. I really like him as a running back, a rotational running back. I think he's just a super well-coached player. And I think he has done a really good job of maximizing his ability. I don't know if his ability is going to be much more than what he is at this point. But if you want to talk about a guy who is physical, smart, willing in pass protection, that is a patient runner, has good vision, is definitely a little bit stiff and isn't a top-level athlete, but is just going to do his job and get what's there. I like an Isaiah Davis. He's not adding anything overly dynamic, but he's going to do a lot of things solid for you. He's a well-built back, too. He's like 210 pounds, too. So, there's an argument to be made for an Isaiah Davis.
Is there anybody here that's picked that anybody absolutely loves? Is there Kent, you, no. Craig, you? I know we're in day 3, so it's hard to completely love guys, right? The best player I saw, and unfortunately for me, like this is kind of stepping on where Craig wants to go, I think, with his later pick. But Nehemiah Pritchett, a cornerback out of Auburn, I think screams pretty Spagsy to me. 6 foot, over 31-inch arms. He ran really fast. His issue is his ability to turn. And like we've seen the Chiefs consistently take chances on outside corners that can't really turn. So like Pritchett being a guy with some size, with some arm length, and the ability to turn and run vertical, he's a guy that just kind of sticks out to me when we're talking about day 3 corners at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're just picking a guy that's pure boundary, doesn't have much flexibility to go in on the inside, yeah, he makes sense because that 709 3-cone ain't going nowhere, in breaking anything like that. It's just not. But 4'3", 640 with, almost 32-inch arms, a big bodied guy, like it makes sense. Like I think Spags would like a guy like that. He's a good tackler too. So, he checks a lot of boxes there. I would be gambling more on athletic upside because they've done that in the past, but he fits along some of the Jalen Watson-esque, kind of player there. He makes a lot of sense, a lot of like for like there. So I wouldn't rule him out or take him off the Chiefs board. I'd be fine with the Pritchett here.
We're going to do it with the 173rd pick in the 2024 NFL mock draft. The Kansas City Chiefs are selecting Nehemiah Pritchett, the cornerback out of Auburn.
All I'm saying, his physical profile. We didn't get agilities for L'Jarius Sneed. Very similar to L'Jarius Sneed from a body type and speed standpoint. Just gonna launch that out there.
Less explosive than L'Jarius.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he did do a vertical jump and it was really bad.
Significantly less explosive than L'Jarius.
That's good. You don't hit a jump.
I want to give some people the opportunity to throw out a position that maybe they want us to take with the 221st pick. So if you're in the chat, maybe just start making some arguments. We'll just kind of get an unscientific poll of who we think, what position we think you guys want us to take here with pick 221. Recapping this draft, Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver out of LSU. We've traded pick 32 and 95 to go up and get Brian Thomas Jr. Michael Hall Jr., the defensive tackle out of Ohio State at pick 64. Malik Washington, pick 131, the wide receiver out of Virginia. Delmar Glaze, the offensive lineman out of Maryland with pick 159. And we've just taken Nehemiah Pritchett, cornerback out of Auburn. The majority of you right now, it looks like, are going, it's tight. Tight end and running back.
Tight end and running back are the two right now.
That is a very Kansas City Chiefs fan type poll. If I've ever seen one. So we can look at a couple of the tight ends here. Isaac Rex out of BYU. Andy Reid loves his BYU guys. This is an older guy. Trey Knox out of South Carolina. Jack Westover out of Washington. Looking through some other tight ends.
No, let's get out of here. No,
I don't love
I
the
like that you skipped over Zach Hines because you're afraid of his mustache.
Yeah, that is
running
true.
Backs. Let's get to running backs.
Everyone, the tight end window is closed. Yeah, I think we got even people saying, "Oof, never mind." Running back.
That was a good one too. But we mostly got people saying running back. I think running back has been the top of the board here.
Okay,
Isaiah
so
still around, man.
Yeah, Isaiah Davis is still sitting there. I think Dylan Lobb and Dylan Johnson are comfortably gone. At least Dylan Johnson's comfortably gone. Dylan Lobb, we'll see. Isaiah Davis, if we think we can make an argument that he's still there at 221. Jace McClellan, Cody Schrader. I know a lot of people like Cody Schrader here. He, just so you know, I don't believe he made the KCSN top 300. So I think he missed out on so don't come asking where Cody Schrader is. Unfortunately, our evaluations, he did not make the top 300. I think he's like 301 or 302 or something like that, but he didn't make the top 300. Frank Gore Jr., Michael Wiley, Carson Steele. Matt,
Carson Steele, but that's a UDFA guy for me.
Yeah. Who do we want to take? Who do we want to take here? We're going running back.
if it's up to me, we're taking Carson Steele here because that's a big running back, good size, good in pass protection, good as a receiver. I don't think he's going to blow anybody away with his running style. It's very Pacheco-like in that we're just kind of trying to find the quickest way from point A to point B, and sometimes that results in us missing a gap here and there, but he's going to run with a lot of power. He's going to run with impact, and he's going to be a guy that's a little bit more versatile on third down, despite being a bigger back. Now, some of the people in the chat have been asking for a bigger, short yardage running back. Carson Steele's bigger. I wouldn't say that he's exceptional in short yardage. He's not bad. I just wouldn't say he's exceptional. If that was your goal, Kendall Milton's sitting right there, and he's one of the biggest running backs in this draft class. True. I just like the versatility of Steele a little bit more. Just being, like I said, that third down type of guy.
I like the Carson Steele idea.
Okay.
I do.
I personally think they're going to be able to, I love him as a UDFA, but maybe in this scenario, pick 221, you're looking at this, you're hearing somebody's going to pick him before UDFA. You're not going to be able to get him. So I get it from that perspective. The Bo Peep Keys is what we like to call that.
The Bo Peep Keys. With the 221st pick, the Kansas City Chiefs are selecting Carson Steele out of UCLA.
Could have taken Kellen Robinson to just be a kick returner with the new kick return rules, honestly.
Yeah,
that's what the
I bet Kellen Robinson, a running back out of Texas that barely played running back, gets drafted way earlier than anybody expects because of this new kick return rule.
Probably.
Yeah, I think so. Gold out of Anthony Gold out of Oregon State too is going to get drafted just to be a returner is my guess as well. So just as a recap here for what we did.
It saves so they can see the whole thing.
Okay. Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver out of LSU in a trade up. Michael Hall Jr., the defensive tackle out of Ohio State at pick 64. Malik Washington, wide receiver out of Virginia at 131. Delmar Glaze, offensive lineman out of Maryland at 159. Nehemiah Pritchett, cornerback out of Auburn at 173. And Carson Steele, the running back out of UCLA at 221. How do we do, boys? How do you feel?
I feel good coming out of this because I think they got the clear-cut fourth best wide receiver in this draft class, and they didn't have to trade up a ton to get him, right? You only move on from that third-round draft pick to get there. You go get Brian Thomas Jr., and he's a guy that is going to step into a role day one. Michael Hall Jr.'s role isn't going to be quite as clear, I don't think, in round two, but he's going to have a purpose. Like, there's going to be a purpose for him coming in to be a pass rusher, especially if you don't have the versatility of Omenihu being able to flex inside, if Dana isn't back to flex inside. So, like, getting another interior rusher with athleticism is there. Malik Washington, again, kind of fits in with Brian Thomas Jr. and Rashee Rice, or with or without going forward. He makes sense to kind of cover it. So, like, I like the first three picks right there. I think they can all serve a purpose year one. And then I think you get some depth pieces, guys, to take over future spots for the team going forward. That's kind of how I think you try to draft in general.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. That round two pick, I know people are looking at that and going, hey, Michael Hall Jr., is that the right usage? Or would have rather, tried to target a tackle or something like that. In that regard, we looked at the tackles, did not love them by any means. I think back to the round two picks that the Chiefs have made recently. Brian Cook's an awesome pick. Again, as a safety, there's Sky Moore's in there. We've got a litany of hit or miss round two picks. I think Michael Hall is a fairly safe round two pick that's going to contribute, going to have a very defined role and ease Chris Jones, as we talked about there. And of course, I love getting Malik Washington at 131. Don't know how realistic it is, but I really love this wide receiver room. And we're now to the point where you're going into the 90-man roster, and guys like Kadarius Toney, guys like Sky Moore don't have concrete locked-in spots. It's not because of their contracts or anything, because the Chiefs don't really save any money or do anything that by losing those guys. But you are truly evaluating the best wide receivers on the roster, which at this point, the Chiefs are not afraid to cut bait. And Brett Veach has done it before. Look at Breland Speaks. Some can argue maybe a year too long, but he got hurt. They are not afraid to bail on players, even when they've drafted them high, and it doesn't matter what money they save with it. So I'm good with all that. And then when you get into day three, the middle and mid parts of day three, you're just taking swings and hoping that they hit.
I think this was a very realistic mock. I think this, I mean, for the most part, like I think, Malik Washington, that's probably at the very end of where he's drafted, would be my guess. And, same with Brian Thomas Jr. I think that's probably close to the very end of where he winds up getting picked. But I think this is a pretty realistic scenario that we've just kind of discussed. I like it. That is going to do it for this episode of the Casey Laboratory. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for participating. We appreciate you. We'll catch you later.
Three-peat.